And I think that was my fastest ever 110 slides in 16 minutes or something. There was one feedback that we look extremely closely at feedback when you, at the end of LeWeb, you will receive an email. Please fill it in. We read it all. I read it all personally, and I read it on Twitter, of course, as well, right now. There was one feedback which was consistent, is we don't understand the guy on stage. That was me, because of my accent. So what I decided to do to address this problem, so that you don't have to hear me the whole time, you'll have to hear my accent a little bit, is to have a co-host that will help me with a British accent this year. And so let me call, welcome on stage with us, Ben Metcalfe, who is the co-host of LeWeb 13 London. Welcome, Ben.
Bonjour, Loïc, ça va?
So Ben is also the co-founder of WP Engine.
I am. I wore the shirt, yeah.
We said no branding.
I know, well.
You have a cool glass.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Loïc really wanted us to wear the Google Glass. I think we've been dubbed glass holes, is that right?
No, I don't think so.
But no, I thought I would wear it as well. We'll see how this works out.
Yeah, we'll play with that. I can see the @replies coming, so that's
really
pretty cool. How is WP Engine going?
It's going well,
what
thank
is it?
you. WP Engine, thank you, is a managed WordPress platform. So we help brands, agencies, large companies, Fortune 500s, all the way down to small companies who want to host WordPress and run WordPress. And we take the pain out of doing that.
Okay, Glass, what's the revenue number of WP Engine? No, that doesn't.
Well, I have it on my screen. I just can't tell you.
Okay, we'll play with that. We have a session on Glass, by the way. So it's going to be Scobble, Ben, and myself just talking about that, that cool talk that Google gave us. This is Googling something right now. All right, so we want to start with the London panel. What else in London? And I'm delighted to have with us, moderated by Ben, Brent Hoberman, who is the founder of Pro Founders Capital, the chairman of Made.com, the founder and chairman of MyDeco, and very good friend, Kleij, who is also a very good friend from Level 39 incubator, and Vidra, who is the head of the campus in London that you know, all of you, of course. And we're going to talk about London and get an update on London as a tech scene. So I'll leave it to you, Ben.
Thank you very much. Should we bring these guys out? Let's welcome them on stage. Awesome. Thank you guys for joining us. So, yeah, LeWeb is all about celebrating startups across Europe, I think. But obviously, we're here in London. Big Ben is literally on the other side of the building out here. So it seems like a great place to start the conference by just checking in and seeing what's going on with the London ecosystem. Obviously, being a Londoner myself is something that's very dear to me. Although 6.5 years ago, I personally left and moved to San Francisco to continue my entrepreneurial endeavors. So, Brent, let's start with you. What would you say has happened in the last 6.5 years, and most recently since I left?
Right. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, many of you will be closer to the East London tech scene than I will, and these guys too. Obviously, that's been the most obvious visible change, and these guys will talk about, I'm sure, the numbers of startups, but I think it was up yesterday on the Bloomberg screen when Loïc and I were there. It was sort of from 15 startups a few years ago to 5,000, the sort of numbers being touted about. I think we need to probe deeper about which of those are going to really get to scale, is the issue. But we have also had some big scale success out of London that's great for the ecosystem. I think in that time, what's also happened is you've had more serial entrepreneurs setting up funds and helping with the ecosystem. So a lot of investment coming in as well. We've also got this interesting arbitrage where American VC funds are investing in more startups here. So I think that's very good. And we've obviously got, London now has the claim to be the most regulatory-friendly environment to set up a startup in at least Europe and possibly the world. So lots of things there about immigration, tax breaks, all sorts of stuff. And more importantly, there's also, London still leads the rhetoric, I think, in terms of where the politicians and business people saying, you really want to start up here. And I think that rhetoric's important as well. And I think the rhetoric arbitrage has gone up as France has gone down in terms of how they talk about business and entrepreneurs. London continues. So that debate is now over. If you're French, you want to be doing a startup in London. You want to send your schools to London. You want to set up a French school in London, actually, because that's where the shortage is, because there are so many entrepreneurs from France, great people wanting to come over. So the talent pool is great. The buzz is even better, but still challenges on the route to IPO. Are there enough IPOs coming out? Are there enough billion-dollar businesses? We've got some. Ocado's broken through now, King.com, Moshi Monsters, the gaming guys, gambling. So we're good at gambling here. Wonga. So there's a lot of that tier is probably better than any other European country you could name. It's also more original, I think, than if you look at I still ask people talk about Berlin, but Berlin is still mostly derivative. I'm sorry, guys, but I'm constantly asking, name me some original companies out of Berlin. I want to believe it. I studied German and French literature at university. I ran a company in Germany. But give me some originality out of Germany, too.
Interesting. So I think the two things you touched on there, which I think are a theme for this, are education and probably funding. I know on this side of the panel, you guys have both done a lot of things around support networks and education, etc. I don't know whether, Easy, you want to start over at Google. I know you're working on things like that.
So just to pick on your first question, I think that one of the biggest things and change in London, I don't know if in the past 6 years, but definitely in the past 2 years, is the density of network has increased significantly. Like, if you go to places like Silicon Valley, maybe New York, Israel, and you throw a stone, you're probably going to hit an entrepreneur. And in London, that wasn't the case until recently, but I think that now, first of all, it's becoming more normative to choose entrepreneurship as a career choice.
In Silicon Valley, you'd be sued by the entrepreneur.
Yeah. In Israel, it's probably normal to throw stones on people. And I think in London, it's really improving. So that, campus, what we're doing at campus is a 7-story building filled with startups. It's usually the way that I describe it. If there was an equivalent between real estate and software, campus would be an open source building. And as part of the open source, we work with great partners, including Central Working, Seedcamp, Tech Hub, Startup Weekend, and other accelerators to power the startup ecosystem. We just recently launched Campus EDU, which is an educational program to support startups in collaboration with universities, with bigger startups and corporate partners. If you're like Airbnb, Seatwave, or one of the big startups, you probably don't need co-working space and you wouldn't come to office hours to get mentorship, but you have a lot that you can teach. This sort of mentorship from more mature startups and experienced entrepreneurs didn't happen naturally. It happened in small meetings and events, but I think now it's much more formulated. People want to give back to the new founders that are starting up, and I'm happy to be part of it.
And so you both are doing different things for support networks and fostering those entrepreneurs, and you also have something similar with Level 39.
That's right. Yeah. Like Brent said, and Easy, what they both noticed is that the density of the entrepreneur network is now reaching the kind of caliber that can support quite a lot of high-growth businesses. And you need a big hopper. You need thousands of startups to be able to percolate through the real home runs, if you like. What we've decided to do at Level 39, Level 39 is Europe's largest accelerator for 3 types of businesses. We decided to specialize. Fintech, because we're in the heart of financial services, and also it's the biggest percentage of GDP of any industry in London, nearly 10%. So it really is a natural that we do that. And also I'm a fintech entrepreneur myself, so it's kind of my territory. But the other areas we're going to focus on is retail tech. So we've got a big retail shopping mall, and we're going to turn that into a living lab for next-generation retail companies to come and get their first pilot within our own shopping malls. 105,000 people come there each day, so it's an amazing testing bed. And then as we grow and build the next part of Canary Wharf, which is called Wood Wharf, just to the east, 20 acres, we're going to use that procurement capacity to bring the next generation of smart city technology into our own city and use that also as a test bed. So we've kind of specialized, and I think that's something that London can do well. It's kind of like very cool because you've got campus in the heart of it open to everyone, and then different areas of London starting to specialize. Brent's own version of Silicon Hill is awesome, and I'd recommend people visit because, I hope you don't mind me calling it Silicon Hill, it's the Notting Hill equivalent. But also in the Olympic Park, they have recently won this incredible anchor tenant, which is BT Broadcast. So you're going to see a lot of sort of media-centric businesses go there. There's fashion hubs setting up so that if you want to specialize, London has something to offer everyone. And that's what the density of the cluster can offer, the support necessary to really support high-growth businesses.
Interesting. And as businesses grow and they want to get bigger, I know that you guys are working on helping startups liaise further with corporates and seeing what the kind of structures that those guys can offer. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think that is also one of the changes to the ecosystem, actually, is now the corporates really, they see this digital change and they want to, they're not stupid, they see it, but it's how do you do it? If you're running a big corporate, how do you, and one of the best ways is to work with startups who are like free R&D for the corporates. So we tried that last year under the Founders Forum umbrella, an events business we run. And we tried it with Great Universal Stores and Argos, and that was a great success. And then what we followed with this year, we'll do about 20 FTSE 100s, ranging from Tesco to GlaxoSmithKline to Hammerson's, the property development group, to The Guardian, Sky, et cetera, and we're working with all of them saying, here's the curated list, here's the startups you need to meet. And with one of those companies, the hit rate was so high, we brought them from a list of 50, we brought them 11 startups. 9 of those 11, they are in contract. A third they want to buy, a third they want to invest in, and a third they want to do biz dev deals. So it's that sort of stuff of the ecosystem. I think it's giving that conduit between how do you actually engage. A, as a corporate, it's quite hard to know what to do. And B, as a startup, it's really hard to find out, A, how do I get all those people in a room from those decision makers, because these companies have 10 decision makers. So you can get bounced from pillar to post, and many startups I speak to are just like, it's just not worth the hassle. My time is limited. I can't take a gamble that I'm going to get 10%. But if you just say it's 20 minutes, you'll know at the end of it if you're likely to get a deal or not, because everyone's in the room. They're like, great, I'm in, and people have been flying over from all over the world for those sort of events.
I think that's very interesting because when I think of San Francisco, I think almost this kind of anti-corporate, anti-big business mentality within parts of the startup scene, and it's very much a them versus us mentality. And you guys trying to do this, which is kind of different. Can you talk a little bit more about why startups would want to be involved with that and the benefits that you're seeing from some of the examples?
Sure. I think, well, the first thing is, I mean, if you look at, I mean, you know Silicon Valley much better than I do, but there are things like Walmart.
Right.
Walmart,
there are a few that are sort of...
like Walmart, they're buying up businesses and working with them. I think why would startups want to? Because my view is one of the biggest challenges in a startup is credibility and scale. But so what I always advise people when they're doing a startup is whatever can give you credibility early on is very valuable. And one of those things is the flagship deal. If you're selling retail tech, for example, and you get the deal with Tesco, suddenly you're in the door of everyone else. I mean, that's the big door opener. That's the validation you needed to change your business dramatically. It's the same with GlaxoSmithKline if you're in health tech. So I think that's the big thing. The first thing is the credibility. The second is the scale these guys give. These guys, I would view them as platforms. We don't have in Europe Twitters, LinkedIn's, and Facebooks, right. But we have some big corporates who can act as global platforms to take tech companies global.
Interesting. And do you guys, on your side, I mean, obviously Google is another big company. I mean, why is Google wanting to specifically, I guess, sponsor or at least fund something like Campus, given that Google already has an entity in San Francisco, it's doing its own thing?
Yeah. Usually it's the first question I get, so I'm surprised that we got so far in the panel without asking.
Sorry about
Campus is a non-for-profit activity for Google. We don't write checks or take equity. We also support everyone, regardless of what platform they're developing on or what products they're developing, even if they're competing with Google, which I think is awesome. Campus is also the first one that we do anywhere in the world, so it's a little bit of an experiment. We since then launched Campus Tel Aviv. The question of why or what's in it for Google, it's simply an ecosystem support. Like there's very few companies that can do something like Campus at this scale, a 7-story building in a city like London. But if we are able to ensure that there's a healthy ecosystem of tech startups not only Google will benefit from it, the entire industry will benefit from it. And we're not doing it as a, it used to be called a gift to the startup community. And I think a gift implies that this is something you give and forget. This is an investment. We have lots of resources, talent, people working very hard on creating programs and initiatives to support startups. For example, every week we have Googlers coming to campus to mentor startups one-on-one. And we've been doing it for over a year. Since the beginning of 2013, we had over 420 entrepreneurs sign up for office hours. So if you guys ever wanted to get mentorship, you don't have to be part of an official program or something like that. You can just sign up for free every Friday from 10 to 12 at campus. We also are bringing thought leaders to help educate the startups and inspire them. So if you're a startup, you could probably use with getting some words of encouragement or asking questions from people like, Eric Schmidt, Guy Kawasaki, these guys on stage as well, which I want to get you guys to campus. But we had like a long series of speakers from successful CEOs, bestseller authors, thought leaders. These are people that probably the startups can't get themselves, but as Google, I can use our brand to help support the ecosystem. So it's really an ecosystem play, and I'm thinking that if this experiment succeeds, I would love to see more campuses pop up elsewhere.
Interesting. I think one of the things for an ecosystem for startups, aside from the support network, is obviously having the fuel to actually grow your businesses, the funding, the investment, things like that. As someone coming back and looking into London, it's always felt for me that although there's lots of people with money here, and with, even with the current economy, there are still people with funds and everything else, but are people really investing? Is that investment network really here? Yeah, Eric.
So it's definitely improving. I have to say that it wasn't great in previous years, but it's definitely improving. And a couple of reasons behind that. One is that it's very interesting. When I speak to Silicon Valley investors, they tell me that we're moving the needle in London. They're noticing a change. They're noticing that the key thing is that the ecosystem is now capable of supporting high-growth businesses. It's all about talent, and particularly access to talent was incredibly important. We're really lucky here in London because we have access to the whole of Europe, where the best talent can come here and start their businesses without immigration issues. That's just an awesome asset that we have here. By the way, if any of you ever hear language used in the press about nationalism and we've got to protect our borders, fight back against that, because we have to be able to attract the brightest and the best to be able to fuel the businesses. So don't listen to that nationalist stuff. This is more about what's necessary. But on the investment side of it, what we've seen is a higher incidence of US investors and non-US investors also coming to start to do deals here. I'm thinking of people like True Ventures, who've now done, 5 deals here and hadn't previously done that. And you see the scouts all the time. And actually, one of the things that we've definitely done better is improve the policy environment to encourage money to go into early stage businesses. And the current government introduced this Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme allowance, which kind of like more or less de-risks 50% of your investment of the first 100,000 as an angel investor, which, qualifying company. That's unlocked a little bit more opportunity. The thing that we need to add to this is the smart investing and to persuade angels to co-invest so they don't make obvious mistakes, which is why Campus and Level 39 are doing office hours here in the main exhibition space. By the way, if you go through into that, we've got both of our teams with a fantastic list of investors who've signed up to meet the company. So if you're a startup and you want to go and to meet some of these investors, go and put your name down for an offers hour session. Can I just recommend you do something? Instead of going and pitching, can you go to these meetings with the next problem that you want to solve and work out whether the investor can help you solve the problem? You'll learn a lot more about the investor that way.
Yeah, on the investment thing, as I said a bit earlier, but I think what is really great is that you do have these venture funds backed by entrepreneurs. Now, you've got the big names, which we all know of venture, and then you've got Notion Capital, Passion, Pro Founders Capital, which I helped start, Atomico by Nicholas Enstrom. And there's probably about another 5 or 6 more. where talking about the value those investors can add, there are real entrepreneurs behind all of those businesses that really can help. So that's a big change in the ecosystem. That didn't exist 6.5 years ago.
Right.
I think there's another area that's not talked about enough, I think, about London, is that we're one of the world leaders in equity crowdfunding. You know, it's completely legal for anyone to invest in a startup as little as £10. And there's, you know, an array of platforms for anything from Seeders, Crowdcube, Crowdbank, and then probably, you know, Living 5, you know, Bank to the Future, and a few others. So you can invest in startups as individuals. This is something that's not possible in the US. So actually, Y Combinator companies don't mind listing on platforms where UK investors can invest in them, because it's legal for us, and it wouldn't be possible in the US unless you're an accredited investor, which means that you need to have like $1 million in assets or something like that. So I think that equity crowdfunding is something that changed, and I agree with Eric 100% and with Brent. You know, there's this new type of funds that are plugging the gap between call it the Sequoias, Accels, etc., and the angels. And there's the CDIS and EIS made this one of the most friendliest environment for angel investors. It's actually hard to lose money if you're an angel investor today. I wish I had more money to invest in startups, but I think it's very early for early stage teams. It's very easy for early stage teams to get the capital that they need to launch the MVP. Now, the question about scaling is a valid one. You know, can they get from MVP to create a company with 100 employees, etc.? That's what we still need to see. But there's lots of company creation happening right now, and you know, the numbers have been growing by hundreds of % year by year.
Interesting. So yes, if you can't get to the next stage, then that's obviously a problem. We have the Series A crunch a little bit in the States and the environment there as well. I mean, do we think that there is enough investment going on? Do you think that is an issue, or?
Well, one of the big underlying things behind the investment is the challenge is it's still very hard to make money in venture in Europe. So it's one of the worst asset classes in general, and people will argue with that, but it's just a fact. I mean, it's a stat, it's a fact. It is, which is why, interestingly, 40% of all venture money in Europe is government funds that go into venture funds, which is an amazing stat.
That is amazing.
That illustrates that we need more billion-dollar home runs. I mean, venture is based on lots of failures to get more billion-dollar home runs. So then you go back into, well, why all those debates on why haven't we got, do we aim high enough? Are we too balanced as Europeans? Maybe. I think that's a real issue. I mean, is it because when you've made $1 billion, it is cool in Europe? Unlike, you know, Sean Parker would probably be now saying $1 billion's not cool. It's 10 billion is cool. You know, in the Valley, if you're there, I'm sure there's so many guys who are like, if you want to be the biggest dog, you've got to be even bigger. And I think the other thing is also exiting along the way is a really interesting point. Is that are the venture funds letting entrepreneurs take money along the way so they de-risk? So they haven't got all their eggs in one basket, so they feel like they can shoot for the stars. Right. Because, you know, even my own company, lastminute.com, it was 0 to 0 all the time. You're like, one bad week and you feel you're worth nothing, you know, but from 100 million one day to nothing the next. And you need to take some risk off the table.
And actually, on that point, I think the next thing we should focus on trying to fix is related to the corporates, because you can actually see the difference between US corporate acquisition who acquire for strategic value. Whereas mostly in Europe, what our acquiring companies do, they acquire a multiple of revenues or EBIT or something like that. And so if we can coach and help our UK and European acquiring companies to think very differently, and actually how a strategy like that might help them avoid becoming the next Kodak, for example.
Yeah.
That's an awesome thing to do.
I think that's really valid because they do struggle with this. But what they've asked us as well, which somebody should publish, is name us the success stories. There are so many terrible stories of when corporates acquire companies and they kill them. And the first thing is they underestimate, almost universally, the power of the founder, I would say. And they overestimate their own ability to fix everything and to sort it out. But that said, there are models where corporates very successfully do integrate acquisitions, and I think we need to expose those.
Well, I mean, IBM's a great example. They've made so many acquisitions that are now part of their product stack, and they have a methodology of integrating. What Yahoo's doing at the moment is actually making us think, wow, Yahoo's really trying to do something serious.
And I think tech companies are probably better at it than if you're talking about those other big corporates in the more traditional world. And it's harder for them too, because they then have to pay tech multiples, and they're valued at 5 times EBITDA or whatever. So it's
Right. So we've got just over 3 minutes left. I'm just curious to kind of get 60 seconds from each of you. Obviously, the startup ecosystem here is very much a journey. It's still evolving. What would you guys, let's go down the line. What would you guys like to see next, sort of 60 seconds each, and where we should get next to?
That's a good question. What I'd like to see next is more ambitious aspirations from UK founders and startups in the UK. Doesn't mean that you have to be from the UK, but if you're coming to start a company here, have big aspirations. Think like an American in that sense, that you can take over the world and not necessarily create a product that's, like very localized for this market only. I also would like to see more founders giving back to the community. So if you're running a successful company, maybe you're beyond, like that growth stage, you manage to get to 100 employees and great revenues, give back, like organize, have informal events or formal events like Brent's organizing, Founders Forum and stuff like that to give back to the community, because there's plenty of people starting and we don't have enough of this operational knowledge of what you have to do on a day-to-day when you run a startup.
And Eric?
What would I like to see? What I'd like to see is us continue to sustain an awesome relationship with continental Europe here, because US and Eastern investors and companies need to see us as a big single market. So anytime you hear in the press, oh, maybe we should vote to get out of Europe, frankly, I'm going to put my washing out there. We really must not and cannot afford to extract from Europe. The more we can do to be seen as a single addressable market, the more likely we are to have investors interested, markets to attack, and so we need Europe to be strong. So I think better collaboration with Europe.
And that is the one draw, I guess, of the States, is that addressable domestic market is so much bigger, so if you treat Europe like that, absolutely.
Although if you've ever tried to establish a company in the US, which I've done, and having to understand the regional differences and the type of people you have to have in each region, it is like a whole bunch of different countries.
That's true.
But I would echo the European point. I mean, I think I constantly look at most of the big successful European companies I named, or UK companies, are UK. And it's a crying shame that lots of those haven't managed to expand. But it does need a renegotiation of how to create a single European digital market. They are working on it. There is going to be more announcements on that coming, and I think that will make a big difference. Other thing for me would probably be just attitudes to risk and failure. It's such a bigger issue, but how do you change that? How can it be cool to fail 3 times, and the experience you've earned that badge, and therefore you can aim higher? It goes back to the problem I mentioned about Germany. German investors keep saying to people, I want the model to be proven somewhere. Whereas we want people to say, I want the model to be proven nowhere, because that's how you hit it out the park.
Right. Well, unfortunately, we have to wrap it up there, but I'd like to thank the panel, Easy, Eric, and Brent. Thank you for joining us. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you, gents.